Homework Solutions, don't think that I didn't just go to the dollar store and get myself some awesome chalk. Take a look at this. This is great. It is called Chalk Huggers. Comes with 6 chalk buddies, these handy dandy chalk holders, and 16 jumbo chalk, all for $10.80. Can't beat that. All right, so anyways, let's get into the solutions. Let's start with the first one, number 1. You had to graph y equals cosine 2x. So the first thing I did here is found the period by taking 2 pi and dividing it by b, and I got a period of pi. That tells me my graph should get through 1 cycle by the time it gets to pi. So here is your final result right here. Notice this graph went through 2 full cycles of cosine by the time it got to 2 pi. That's because there was a 2 for the b value, which is known as the frequency. So there's number 1. Number 2 was y equals sine 4x. All right, calculate the period, 2 pi over b, which will become 2 pi over 4, which reduces to pi over 2. So we have a sine graph whose frequency is 4 and period is pi over 2. So here is what that should look like. It's kind of cluttered, but notice it's getting through 1 cycle by the time it gets to pi over 2. That's because the period was pi over 2. And notice there are 4 complete cycles of sine in this picture by the time we got to 2 pi. That's because the frequency, or the b value, is 4. All right, the last one, number 3, I told you was challenging. So take a look at this. Y equals cosine half x. So when we go to calculate the period and we do 2 pi over b, it's going to be 2 pi over 1/2. All right, how do I do 2 pi over 1/2? Well, this is going to take us back to chapter 7-8, because we're actually dividing fractions here. So we're actually doing 2 pi divided by 1/2, because that's what 2 pi over 1/2 means. Now remember from 7-8, division of fractions, keep, change, flip, right? Keep the 2 pi over 1, change it to multiplication, flip it to 2 over 1. So when I multiply those two together, I get 4 pi over 1, which is really just 4 pi. So this graph has a period of 4 pi. Now that is crazy, because that means this graph is going to get through 1 full cycle by the time it gets to 4 pi. But yet I'm only asking you to graph it up to 2 pi. Now let's go back up here for a second. The b value is 1/2. That's your frequency. Frequency is how many cycles it will get through by the time it gets to 2 pi. Remember, 1 full cycle of cosine looks like this, but we only are going to see 1/2 of a cycle. So this picture is actually going to look like this. I'm only seeing 1/2 of a cosine cycle by the time we get to 2 pi. If I had continued on, which you didn't need to, this graph would have gone back up and come back down and finished way out at 4 pi, which was the period. But we didn't need to graph it that far, so we're only seeing 1/2 of a cycle because the frequency was 1/2. All right, a little tricky, a little challenging. Again, trying to get you guys ready for pre-calc. All right, yes, my driveway needs to be sealed. Don't judge me. All right, it's on my list of things to do. Have a good day.